Hello, I'm Ashley, and I am sitting down with Pastor Joel and Pastor Jonathan to kick off their season 3 press tour of my favorite podcast, What the Flock. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi, Ashley.
You doing good? You guys looking nice and summarized, like you're like summer, summer glow.
Yeah, I get it from mowing the lawns. Pastor Jonathan gets it from the suntan place down the street in their. No, I don't know.
I do. By Rosie. Rosie helps me get tan. You have
a tanning lady?
A vacation. I have a vacation coming up. So
I thought maybe you were tan from like being in Italy or something,
I'm getting ready to be in the Cayman Islands.
Awesome.
So that I know, well, I gotta go to the Caymans. I don't want to get, if I don't have some prep, I'll get zilched. So
you gotta enjoy yourself.
Exactly.
Sit by the beach and not be burnt and toasted for 2 weeks after.
Yeah, we don't want a lobster guy. That kind of ruins the trip. There's my first tip.
That's great. Thank you. That's awesome. Great way to kick us off. Lobster, bad.
Do you want any lawn mowing tips?
No.
Okay, let's move on.
No.
Nice. No. So what we're really here to talk about is a few of the episodes from season 3. And I want to just sort of like touch on the episodes on sanctification, witnessing, evangelism, and then relationship versus fellowship. But I don't want to talk about those in too much detail because they're so good and they're so meaty, and I really want people to go listen to them. So I feel like we could talk for hours, or some of us could talk for hours about these topics. But again, I hope people will go listen to them. I have to say that as I've listened to season 3, I feel like there's just so much depth in each episode. There's so much richness in each episode. And it could be because season 3 is really where you guys talked about, making this forward motion, or like we're doing this forward progress. And so it's really talking about like the topics that come after salvation. But for me, each episode that I listened to had some like mic drop moments, right? Where I was just like, did he just say that? Is that what he said? Like, I've never thought of it that way before. And I would have to like go back and listen to it. Just like some really powerful things for me, and like unlumping some of these concepts that I had lumped together, and it caused some confusion for me. And so unlumping these really helped me to get settled. So I super appreciate the work that you guys did to really like smooth this all out and straighten this all out for me. Now, knowing you both in real life, I will tell you, it was easy for me to like listen to these episodes and sort of sit back and be like, Pastor Joel and Pastor Jonathan, like they've always known this information. Like they're so smart. They're so wise. They have so much understanding, which may be true. I think it is true, but it's not fair for me to assume that you guys didn't learn anything while you were putting these episodes together. So I guess my question for you would be, like, specifically in these episodes of season 3, did you guys have any revelations as you really like dug deeper into life after salvation?
Yeah, I would say every episode, or to be fair, almost every episode, there is something that neither of us had expected to talk about. That is something in the moment we're learning. And so it's almost hard for me to pinpoint a specific example, especially within the 4 episodes you have been assigned to, or the 4 episodes you've helped us out with this interview. But yeah, I mean, we know a lot about the topics that we're teaching because we've done a lot of work. We're passionate about this stuff, and we study a lot, and we talk a lot about these topics, but every episode there's something like there are parts of the episodes that we are I guess kind of scripted with certain definitions that you have to say. But when Jonathan and I are just hashing out this stuff and talking, when it's not just a specific reading a Bible verse or quoting a definition, it's just him and I talking. And a lot of times we're learning stuff in the moment. And it's just one of the reasons why we have fun is because it's just getting this like personal revelation as we go. It's a lot of fun.
Nice.
Yeah. And I think for me, so much of this, and I absolutely have grace on the brain. The topic of grace is in the forefront of my brain. And one of the things that I did not know before learning what I did about grace and really applying that, just how important it is to have that definition right. Because if that definition isn't right, then there is no going forward. So I think when we're talking about sanctification, we're talking about all these forward steps. If the definition of grace is correct, then it's something that I can continually grow in over time. I don't get the credit for it, but the grace, and this is one of the points that just like, it blows my mind constantly. But the grace that saves us is the grace that sanctifies us.
Yeah, that is
like that is a revelatory,
so profound
point to, that we really emphasize in these episodes. I didn't grow up living that. I mean, there was I don't know if that was explained to me. I think there were stories that I think is really similar, like that we could point to and go, yeah, God's grace is saving these people, like thinking about the children of Israel. God's grace, God's influence, bringing them out of the promised land, out of Egypt, out of that hole, out of, saving them from this bad place, is the grace that is, and the influence that is going to lead them into and in the promised land to live this journey. But all of that is not possible without the definition of grace. If the definition is wrong, we can't see how that journey is all God's influence and God's grace directing the children of Israel. So I think it's an absolutely, revelatory point that we talk about in sanctification.
Yeah, grace is at the heart of season 2, and grace is still at the heart of season 3. Because it's at the heart of salvation and sanctification.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's cool. I think one thing that I feel when I listen to your episodes is like that you are both so genuine in your podcast, but one of the things that I think is really maybe unique is that what I hear in the podcast is genuine to who you are. And I feel like it translates so well from the podcast to like talking to you in person or like seeing you somewhere out in public. It's like, it's so genuine and it's so authentic. So that is just something I really appreciate. All right. So, something that we, heard you say in one of the episodes when you were talking about the loose perspective is that anybody who is like leaning on that loose perspective is actually just avoiding tension. And that was super settling for me. I feel like I have this tendency to avoid tension. Yes.
Me
so,
too.
Okay, good. It's not just me.
And it's definitely not just you, but it is Jonathan as well.
There's two of us.
Yeah.
It is both of you.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you guys want to share about that? I do have a question, but is there anything you want to share about that loose perspective being, avoiding the tension?
Well, yeah. First off, I feel so known by you to be like, one of the episodes you said something, because that's how I feel all the time about all our episodes. And that's why it was hard for me to just pinpoint an example in your first question, because it's like, you've proven that you really appreciate the podcast and have listened to a lot of them, because I can't pinpoint the exact episode, but I also understand the point of what you're making is we do reference that in multiple episodes as well. And that's actually when I'm doing the pre-production stuff and I'm trying to figure out with all these topics, okay, which one is the strict side, which argument's the loose side. That is the thought I have. With the strict side, I go to what's the list of rules, the effort. And then with the loose side, I'm thinking, what's the avoid tension? That's the flow thought, or the instructing or guiding thought I have to try to put myself in the shoes of the people on either side. With the loose side, my first thing is, what would I do on this side to avoid tension on me and on others? It's not just about me avoiding tension for myself. I don't even want to put it on other people. So that would be, some of my commentary on that. I appreciate what you said there.
Yeah. So the strict side is all like that list that Pastor Joel said, which is great. And that list is effort, and it can hurt people. That list makes it all behavioral. Let's change this behavior. Let's do it. Works. And that hurts people. So people on the other side go, well, at least we're not hurting people.
Right.
Right. Like, at least we're not the people that are causing all of that damage. So they go, we've done a better job. And then the result is people get just as hurt.
Or worse in the long term.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
It's enabling.
Yeah.
Is what
so
it
up
is.
Front, it looks, why it's so damaging is up front, it looks right. It looks right to be nice all the time. It looks right to be a kind person. But if I'm enabling somebody, it means the path that they're on, I'm making excuses for the path that they're on, which means the further they go down that path, which I've basically given them the energy to propel themselves down that path forward, that path gets more destructive. When they're on the wrong path, it gets worse over time. So up front, that's why it's so destructive, because it's deceiving. It looks right up front, but it's just ends up being wicked.
So something that Joel and I have been talking about a lot is that it is better to be mean than to be enabling.
Yeah.
Okay. And the most extreme example of that is with your salvation. It's better to err on the side of, being too harsh with someone and help them and confront them and step into stuff. And it's better for someone to make it into an eternity with our Lord and Savior and be mean than for them to think I'm a nice guy and enable them into hell, in the lake of fire. So it's like, given those two options, it is better for me to confront and step in than it is for me to enable. Now, it doesn't mean that gives me a license to be a jerk. No. I can still be kind and caring, and I should be speaking the truth in love with patience, and careful instruction and all of that. I should be gentle and wise, but I should not pull my punches. I should be able to deliver the truth in a way that's for that person's benefit, and it is going to be painful. Classic. I mean, all those disciples are saying to Jesus, like, why are you saying it like that? Oh my goodness, why are you talking like that? That hurts. Like, Jesus is calling Peter Satan, like, whoa, that's if I called someone Satan, someone would go, wow, Jonathan, that's super mean.
Right.
And but it doesn't make it wrong. It's really tense. It's really hard. So it is better to do that. It's better that we give the ultimate answer at the end of every episode that is really tense and difficult than say, you know what? You live your own journey and you do whatever you want and you just we're
you
all
know what?
fine.
It's just a good thing you're asking the questions.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, like we don't need the answers, and
Yeah. So it's better to
that's
to deliver the answer that we believe is God's answer
Mhm.
and experience some backlash and some push
Mhm.
than hold back that answer. Again,
Yeah.
those are two very different eternal conversations that we would be having.
Mhm.
So
speaking
ahead.
the truth in love still is tense, even
It
in
is.
love.
It
'Cause
is.
truth is rigid. Truth doesn't care if you believe it or not. Truth doesn't change. We need to adjust to it.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
painful even when it's done in love.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I love what you're sharing, because I definitely have been guilty of enabling people. And it's something that I think I'm growing in and something I'm working on. But I'm wondering, this is not the question I had, but I do think it's a question worth asking, is like, in one of the episodes, you talked about, I think in a couple of them, you talked about how, you know, you use less words with the people, like relatives and
Yeah.
family that you're spending the most time with, and you use
Right.
more, you're more focused on words. So how does what you're saying relate to that? Because I feel like what you're sharing is different than that.
Yeah. So really what we're talking about in the episode where we discuss what is more important, words or actions, depending on the context. That's what we're talking about, is depending on the context, which is more effective, which has the greatest return on investment as quickly as possible. We're not talking about which is the option that we should do in every situation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference there. What we just did is we talked about, it was contextless. We talked about how should we communicate with people all the time. It's the truth in love. And we should err on bringing tension
Mm-hmm.
than bringing comfort.
Mm-hmm.
That's every context.
Yep.
What we were talking about in the episode, and I'm venturing to say it was probably the witnessing episode or the evangelism, one of those, where the point of the episode is that we're trying to bring this message to other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the point of that wasn't to say in some situations words aren't important and in some situations actions aren't important. It's in the context of when I'm around people that I interact with all the time, actions are more important than words, because they're going to see whether or not my actions are actually in line with the words that I do speak. So they need to see that fruit, because I'm around them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm on the elevator with somebody that I'm never going to see again, there's not enough time for them to see the fruit in my life. So that's why it's not that my actions aren't important in that scenario, but it's saying if I'm going to try to reach this person for Christ and actually live and present the gospel to them, it's more important in that specific context that I have my words right. Because in that 3 minutes on the elevator with that person, there's a lot I can say with words, and there's very little I can say with my actions in 3 minutes that are going to win someone to Christ. So that's where really what we're dealing with here is a specific context versus what's contextless. What is something we should do in every situation?
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
it's always going to be the truth in love. Always.
Always.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So it kind of comes back to grace too, right? Where it's like in either scenario, just like do what God tells you to do, right?
Absolutely.
And confess and repent when you don't.
Yeah.
Right. There it is.
Yeah,
Yep.
cool. Okay. So I do want to get back to the question that I had related to like that loose perspective and avoiding the tension. And one thing I have, wondered about you guys is there a podcast topic that you don't want to talk about, that you'd rather just not go there?
Yeah, I think we've covered a handful of them already. There's some that are like even season 1, Ashley, some of those were tough when we're talking about divorce, sex before marriage. These are the topics that we've already had a lot of pushback on us in our lives before the podcast. The grace episode. These are episodes we're really excited because the answer to these questions are so unorthodox the truth, the ultimate answer is different than what Orthodox Christianity, or I should rather say the man-made tradition that's taken place of the Word of God. But there's a plenty of episodes. I mean, I love those episodes. I get energy off of them too, but there's episodes that we are yet to do in some of the future seasons that we've started planning out that, again, there's so much tension with some of these episodes. Like the thought, just for instance, the thought of doing episodes that talk about suicide or abortion or rape, stuff like this. These are really, really tough topics that I'm not even sure if we're going to cover the ones that, like, those are just examples. But for instance, we do have ideas for bringing some of these really hot button issues to the light and talking about them. The thing is, as much tension as there is with those topics, and as much maybe even fear that I have in addressing those topics, I think the higher the level of tension, the more excited I also am for those topics. So that the excitement, like, I'm not afraid to post, not to the point where it will ever stop us from doing a topic that we feel like needs to be addressed. But there is definitely higher levels of tension that are like, ugh. There's episodes where even in the Mulk podcast, you'll hear me and Pastor Jonathan say, holy cow, like, I think there's a couple episodes season 3 where the Mulk podcast starts by us saying, oh, we're going to get in trouble for that one. It's like,
oh yeah.
There's some of these topics that are just really tense, but those are the ones. I think that's what happened. There's this just exchange of tension and relief, and the energy we get from these episodes it coincides with the amount of tension. So that's why, as afraid as I am, or the tension with these, I feel like those are the episodes I'm the most excited about too.
Was it the laborers episode where we talked about things that God can't do?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, man. That's why I'm like
yeah,
extreme
all of those
sigh from Joel's mouth right now is just like, yeah, I remember some of the things we said in that episode that are just
whenever you're like, God can't do this,
Yeah.
you're like,
God can't fill in the blank. God can't fill in the blank is stuff that is really, it can be hard to say.
Yeah. Honestly, a lot of the stuff for me was the God's Nature series. One, because I just want to drop the bomb on what God's nature is. And there was like in season 2, there's so much closing of the gate.
Oh, geez.
So that what we do at Music of Life Church Appleton is we cover these topics. Like
you're in the middle of the God's Nature series right
now.
Yeah.
I'm going to be covering the names of God on Sunday. And it's like, for our people who've been around this a lot, they're like, dude, when are you just going to give the answer? Like, just explain God's nature. And so much of it is closing all of these gates about what God, how he's not, like what he's not like why can't God's nature be omnibenevolent? Why can't he be all loving or do whatever he wants or all knowing? Like those omni topics are so sensitive, and it's like the reason why it's hard for me to get up and preach about those or to do a podcast is because I have damage in sharing this information. I have damage in someone going heretic, just like throwing the towel. And it's and I just want to be friends with everyone. And like, can we just like slow dance to Endless Love in the Dark? I mean, friends can slow dance to Endless Love in the Dark
and hold hands, right?
Yeah. So it's like, why can't we do that? But why, that as soon as we present these topics, it's just like, oh no,
let's give you the right answer quick.
Yeah. Those have been really tense. Those have been some tense conversations.
I don't know if we've
evangelism and witnessing is another one where it's like witnessing, like, oh no, now, you're doing a podcast about witnessing. But when the closer we get to that ultimate answer, the more happy I feel.
And there is a lot of episodes where we don't really get to the ultimate answer until the very end, and Jonathan's always chomping at the bit because we're doing all this dance of like, here's the strict, where there's some episodes where we kind of have to give the ultimate answer up front. It is kind of alluded to. And there's plenty of episodes where we don't at all. And it's just, you have to listen to us talk for a half an hour before we tell you the right answer. In the God's Nature series is that times 6 episodes.
Bingo. It's not. Yeah, dude. It's brutal.
In the
And
story,
so what it feels like is you're just telling people what God we are essentially, but God isn't this, God isn't this, God isn't this. But it's so necessary because it's such a deeply held belief. It's such an important concept.
It is. Yeah.
So
and we do give the answer to what would these concepts be. What would the right answer, ultimate answer be behind sovereignty, behind the omnis, right? But we aren't saying what God's nature is. And I don't know if we've told this story on any of the interviews or not, I can't remember, but when we did the God is Love season 2, now we're talking about season 2, but when we talk about the tension and chomping at the bit to give the right answer, we did the season 2, episode 1, God is Love, which the point of that episode is to really explain what does God is Love mean and to show that that isn't his nature. Me and Jonathan really, I kind of dropped the ball and in the recording and was like, you know what? Here's God's nature. God's nature is right and just. And then we just start commentating, and we do the rest of the episode. And Jonathan afterwards, he's like, great job, Pastor Joel. But we need to look forward at the next few episodes because I'm not entirely sure that we were supposed to talk about God being right and just. And I come to find out when I did forecast the next 5 or 6 episodes, like Jonathan was right. The plan was to just close these doors. So that's how hard it was. It's so hard that even in that first episode, the B-sides of this podcast, they're all deleted in cyberspace now, but the editing that had to happen in that first episode was we had to cut out a lot of stuff that we were teaching because we were teaching it too quick, because we were really energized to give people the answers we know is going to bring people healing. But there is a process. It was important, and we learned how important it was to bring people through even learning this stuff decently and in order. And there's so much damage, especially involved in God's nature, that really what we're doing is helping people. It feels tense to us, but we're actually helping people experience it in a safer way. It may seem tense to us because we're holding something back. Really, to the audience, what we're doing is we are kind of listening to Endless Love and holding hands in the dark with our audience by just slowly walking them through this instead of just throwing it at them. And now they're left with all these questions,
right?
All these unanswered questions. And if I don't have the time to sit and answer all these 100 questions they have, so what we did really for 5 episodes is we answered every question we've ever gotten about God's nature before we taught you what God's nature was.
Wow.
So
intentional, so loving. I think that listening to season 3, it has been incredible for me to hear how these episodes have built on top of each other, and how it's been so intentionally, or at least I feel like it's been so intentionally planned. When I first started listening to season 1, it was like, cool, these episodes are cool. Like I love what they're doing. And now that we're into season 3, I think it's so obvious that there has been this intentional plan and this building. Yeah. And, I think that's why season 3 to me feels so meaty and so rich, because it's like we have this history established, this foundation established, and now it's just like building up taller and taller. So I appreciate it. I'm imagining we could talk about fellowship now, and how, I imagine you and the people you're in fellowship with have spent a great amount of time investing into this podcast and figuring this all out together. So I just think
absolutely.
I don't have a question there. You can commentate if you want, but I think it's cool.
None of us have learned any of this stuff in the Music Life Church crowd, at Winneconne Christian Fellowship, all the things we've learned, all the things we teach, none of it has been a person alone. None of it. So it's definitely a family event.
Yeah, and it's we in order for I think the ultimate answer to happen, and I think this is probably a picture of the way things are going to look forever, but learning something new or experiencing something new is only possible with unique individuals bringing different perspectives, where if we were all the same, we wouldn't get a unique perspective. And it's highly unlikely that anything that is revelatory would come out
That's great.
of this. It's like it takes Pastor Joel and I being different to have the episodes and the experiences that we have. And like I love What the Flock, but really my favorite in all of it is the Music of Life Church podcast. That's my favorite to be a part of and interact, because I feel like in the Music of Life Church podcast, I get to just kind of like rip and go off script and say to Joel, what do you think about this theory and that theory? And I'm not necessarily worried that the listener is going to be, there's going to be too many steps off the path and they're going to feel lost. This is more like, let's go off script and we'll eventually pull it back. And it feels more like a for real podcast of two guys having a conversation. Like this is the way that Jonathan and Joel talk to each other, like in fellowship, if they're working out some theory that they have. And What the Flock, I would say, is there's much more of a relational component of kind of like a give and take. And we have more of a script that we're trying to do in What the Flock. So that's where it's like, I think if people want to see what Joel and I are like in fellowship, the Music of Life Church podcast is the thing to look at, because that's very much like, let's just record and let it rip, right? And we learn things in the moment. And so this is what's continuing to happen more and more and more, is that we are learning in the episodes and we're discovering things together or having a new application. I think part of it is just you record and just start talking. And I think our faith is increasing that God's going to show up and teach us something, because we're unique and because we really want people to be drawn to him in all of this and get to know him. And he shows up a lot when there's a lot of tension. It seems like the moments where he's really, really present.
I think he's
in all those moments where you feel like you're jumping off a cliff,
Yeah, I think Joel, I think the Father brings tension. So when he sees people experiencing and embracing tension, he's like, "Ooh, maybe these people want to hang out, right? These people might be able to handle me. They might want to." Yeah, he does. He always shows up.
Wow, that's cool. And such a gift that you sort of bring people along, and you are willing to like share that part with other people and be about other people in that. So thank you.
Well, Pastor Joel's a teacher. He's a teacher, loves to teach. I know we call him Pastor Joel, but at the heart of everything is the teacher.
I like it when people like if I had a nickname, just call me the Professor. That'd be awesome. That's the nickname I want.
Yeah, right.
It's not Joel. The nickname I have. That's the nickname I want to, ascribe myself, which is a little self-serving. But yeah. Anyways, yep.
Well, yeah, we need people to come along with us. Is why I say that. Like I really feel like I'm called to be a shepherd, and shepherds need flocks, and teachers need people to teach. So we're appreciative of the people that listen. And that are coming along on the journey. Is like the fact that there are people like yourself, Ashley, who are out there listening to it and engaging with it and have questions about it and want to talk about it and use it and apply it and even tell us where we're wrong. The fact that that's happening, that those interactions are going on, is really, really fun. And it's building, which is exciting.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And I feel like Pastor Tater is a great example of somebody who, started out in a very different place where he is now in season 3. So, the episode on evangelism taught me that, evangelism is amplifying a message, right? And it's obvious that you, as a Music of Life Church, both of you, Music of Life Church pastors, and your restoration program, like, you have the tools to help somebody. That is a message worth amplifying, right? And so I guess my question for you is, do you have experience with churches who maybe are amplifying this message, but they're not actually living it? Or like they're amplifying the wrong message?
I do I have experience? 100%. 100%. One of the things that I say is, this is kind of for all the music fans out there. You can sometimes have two options of churches that you can find. There's one church that is, the what they teach and how they operate is kind of like the song "Row, row, row your boat."
Yeah.
Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, and it's really simple. And what they do is the message isn't really, deep, but it is recorded. It's like recording that song in the greatest studio in the world. And it's "Row, row, row your boat," or it's "Mary Had a Little Lamb," versus getting like a cell phone recording of a Beatles song. And it's not the greatest quality. It's not the greatest production, but the song behind all of it is absolutely epic and life-changing and amazing. So what I really feel like is what the flock in our churches are like: revelatory, life-changing, amazing music, but it's still so very new, and it's not shiny and big. So it doesn't seem like there's a lot there. It doesn't seem like because the production's not there. Sometimes people can go, well, the message isn't there, versus people looking at the production of things and the message isn't there. So that's a lot has been kind of my experience, and that's the way that I see it. And I'd rather be a part of the less production, but an amazing message, even though I love both.
Yeah.
So
Row, row your boat's a great song. Right?
it is.
But yeah, I'm similar. I mean, I don't have as profound of as an analogy as Pastor Jonathan, but I would say my biggest issue in most of my experience is churches in general. My experience is that there isn't a message being like there's not a message being amplified for these people to live out. It's like there's not a depth of teaching enough to really hold anybody to some standard. And that's part of the issue is Christianity isn't expressed in a way where people can intentionally live it out. So there's, when all you're presented with is row, row, row your boat, the standard you're meant to live is as low of a standard as that song is. So my issue isn't so much are they living out what they're teaching, it's more where is the message, or what is the message? What are you? What is your purpose as a church? What truth are you amplifying? And usually it's too abstract to even get to that point. But where my frustration lies more often than not is with the leaders or pastors of these churches than it is with the churches themselves. That's my audience anyways, is I try to be a teacher or pastor of other pastors. And that's where, when you start really getting down to what is our own personal theology, what do we understand about God, what's the doctrine we hold to be true, when you have those conversations, is where more often than not my frustration lies in people just not being willing or able to answer those questions than it is having the wrong answer. I wish people would be more willing to just be wrong with their answers, but more often than it's just like pulling teeth just to get somebody to explain themselves, just trying to understand you. How many times do I have to, like, it is not fun to have to ask somebody the question, do you want to be understood? That's not a fun question to ask. But so often the interactions I have with pastors go that way because we're asking each other questions, or it starts by them coming after me with a question about what I believe or what they've perceived I'm doing wrong. And when I ask a question in return, it's just hypocrisy. I'm going to hold myself to a lower standard than I hold everybody else to. And you don't have the right to question me, but I can question you. And I don't have to answer you. I don't answer to you. So that's where my frustration lies. It's definitely there. It's not so much the abstractness of the messages or it is the abstract message is my frustration more than it is, are these people living it out or not?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's interesting is that a lot of our churches, they're amplifying the message of Jesus, which is amazing. I'm so glad that people are helping people, get saved and have start and begin a relationship with Christ. I think that's awesome. Just so much of the time it stops there. And so much of the time it's just they're doing something beyond what it is that they say they believe, and it hurts people. Where it's like, if your mission is to spot heresy and call it out, then I would want people to have that be in their mission, not the tenets of Christianity, the kind of the boilerplate tenets, or the Nicene Creed is a better way to say that. If we all followed that completely and didn't deviate from those things, then yeah, we would be a lot healthier getting along with each other. But oftentimes the message that we've seen other churches amplify are different than what they say their beliefs are. And to Pastor Joel's point, that's hypocritical if they're justifying what they wouldn't want someone else to do towards them.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think also very scary that there seems to be so many people just sort of teetering on this line. And I was talking to my husband recently, and I just said, I feel so grateful to know the information that we have, and to be able to live my life in this way. I feel so grateful to be, a leader in our church, and I wouldn't want to live any other way. So I guess, what is the disconnect? What is the disconnect between somebody like me or you or anybody in your churches and somebody who is, whatever you're talking about, like this heresy? What's the disconnect? What's the difference?
It really comes, in my opinion, the thing that's stopping people from experiencing the life that you've just described for yourself, Ashley, is you've given up your plan for happiness and other people haven't. You have come to the realization that the only way for you to live this life that you have just expressed is for you to give up your will to God, to allow your plan for happiness to crumble, and to adopt God's plan for happiness for you, which is really just as simple, not easy, but as simple as allowing His grace to flow through you, through your uniqueness, to impact the other people in your community. Really, it's season 3 is really God's plan for happiness for everybody. If everybody could listen to season 3 and adopt for themselves those doctrine and live them out according to their own uniqueness, it would result in their happiness and their joy. And the people who are getting in the way and who aren't living the life you are people who still think that whether they're even aware of it or not, the implication is, or the cause behind it is really they still think their plan for how they ought to live their life is better than God's. That's really what it comes down to. And that's, I mean, that's a lot of Christians, when we become Christians, we're meant to give up our will to God. That's really another way to say salvation is I'm no longer in charge of my life. You are. But we can express our will to the Lord and still have all of these beliefs and feelings and thoughts within us that still need to be burned away. Part of sanctification is this continual process of burning away the residuals of the plans we've carried with us for so long, the beliefs, the flawed patterns of how I've led my life up until that point. What happens is when salvation is taught and sanctification isn't, there's no standard and there's no method of which a person is instructed or guided to continue to burn away that flesh. When it's just salvation, what happens is people get saved, and then I still live the life. Basically, I still live according to the patterns I did before Christ. And that's really the difference between what you shared about yourself and these other people, even Christians with pure and good intentions who want to live for the Lord. If they don't know the right method to sanctification, their plans are going to weasel their way through their thought process and start manifesting in their life again. So then what's the result? We have Christians in the name of Christ causing damage and trying to hide it or rationalize it away because we don't want to tarnish the name of Christ. So for the sake of Christ, I don't admit I hide these things. I hide where I'm wrong for the sake of Christ. It's just causing more damage. So that's really what I think. It's like, do you still think your plan for happiness is better than God's plan for happiness?
That's so good. That is such a good answer.
Mm-hmm.
Man,
I learned it from watching you, Dad. I mean, Jonathan. I learned it from watching you. Well, Jonathan's the one who taught me. Really, we say the Father, like we talk about what's Jesus's one thing. It's connecting people to the Father. He does a bunch of stuff, but the thing he cares about the most is connecting you, an individual, to the Father. What's the Holy Spirit's one thing? It is administrating the body of Christ. It is coordinating this group of cells and unique beings to do the will of God. What is Jehovah, the Father's one thing? We say husbanding, right? He really wants to, he's a potter. He wants to work the clay. He wants to work the dirt. He wants to grow you. He can't grow himself. He wants to grow you. That's his one thing. Pastor Jonathan recently taught me, and a bunch of us from Music Life Church, I think a perspective about what is Jehovah's one thing that goes beyond husbanding, being the husbandman, that I think gets a little bit more to the intentions of Jehovah's husbanding, more to what is at the heart of what he wants for us. And it's your happiness. What's the thing Jehovah wants to do? What's the thing the Father wants to do for everybody? Is to make you happy. He is the expert at making you happy. And it comes by him husbanding you, by working who you are, developing you into this amazing being, and facilitating the body of Christ and his Son and the Holy Spirit. But that's it. That's so I did, Pastor John. So thank you. It's a good answer. I learned it from you. You're the one who put words to that it's changed my life, that different switch of a perspective.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's such a good answer. I love it. And I think that, Ashley, the reason why I feel like you are where you are at is because you're humble and willing to admit that you're wrong, like Pastor Joel said. And sanctification is a journey of discovering where I'm wrong and continually being wrong. And as good as it gets is really, Jesus even talks about that. He says, what is it, John 15? Is that I'm the vine? Is that John 15?
That's the growth chapter.
So
the growth chapter.
Every branch in Jesus that doesn't bear fruit, God prunes it. So not that Jesus is doing anything wrong, not that Jesus is sinning, but there's branches in Jesus that don't bear fruit. And God is snipping them. Well, there's branches that we are way further than. Like we're trying to grow fruit from this branch, spending a ton of time doing that. Go like putting all of our nutrients and our effort towards what Pastor Joel said, our plan.
Mhm.
And if we're trying to grow this way and Jehovah wants us to grow this way, then this is going to be very painful when that gets cut off. And we need to be willing to do that and experience that, you know, and let that go. But very few people will admit that they're wrong. Very few people will continue to say, yep, what's the next area? And rejoice over the fact that, wow, God showed me how I was wrong about this thing.
Hooray, I'm wrong again.
Yeah, it's really special. I think that is be very different if we kind of treated being wrong like kids do a lot of times, but they're just like, oh, okay, sure,
Yep.
you know,
Move on.
hey,
I gotta play in the yard.
Right. Can you not do that? Like, we shouldn't be doing that because we shouldn't be running with scissors because you could fall and hurt yourself, and we don't want that. Do you want that? No, I don't want that. Okay, boom, put the scissors down. And now, like, could we just treat being wrong like that? But it's like, oh, I ran with scissors. I'm such a bad person.
And you're so mean to me.
Yeah.
I can't believe you told me. You are saying I don't know how to use scissors the right way.
Yeah, exactly. You think I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a great place to end. I think you guys answered that question just so beautifully. And just like this idea of sanctification, it being uncomfortable and maybe not always fun, but I think the question is, do you want to be happy?
Right.
I do.
Yeah.
I want to be happy long term. So
long-term healthy happiness.
Yeah. So thanks for sitting down with me. Thanks for chatting. I am just so grateful for both of you, the work you do, the time and energy that you put into this, so that we can learn and we can grow. And those who want to be long-term happy can tune in and apply some of these things and watch their life change.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Great interview.
Yeah, so much fun. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Yep.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.